All right, so this weekend, this was week 3 of Epic, and another great message this weekend.
Thanks, man.
This idea of pain and suffering is something that a lot of spiritual people, Christians, wrestle with.
Mm-hmm.
And tackling this idea is not a easy undertaking, and you set that up. Right?
Oh, yeah.
This is a hard topic to talk about.
That's right.
So the question is this reconciliation between the idea of a all-powerful, all-loving God allowing so much pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way that you presented this idea, because this is probably the number one answer when you ask most people who don't believe in God, like why they don't believe in God. And it's, I could never believe in a God that will allow so much pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you did a beautiful job answering this. But I wanted to expand into this idea of free will. And I know we've had this conversation before.
Yeah.
But I think this is a really good component of that as well, is free will is an important part of this reconciliation of pain and suffering. Do you agree?
Agreed. Yeah. Historically, when we talk about the problem, the so-called problem of evil, there are two approaches that we can take. One is that sort of the intellectual, logical problem, which I didn't tackle. And the other is the sort of the emotional, psychological problem of evil. That there's one thing to create argumentation philosophically, theologically, and debate that. But then there's the other side of like the real suffering and pain that we experience due to that. And a lot of it, like you said, is due to our own volition, our own free will. And I think I tried to lay that out very practically.
Right.
And not to dive too deep into that intellectual side, to say, hey, there's all of you in here have or will experience pain and suffering that you don't bring, that you're sort of a casualty of because of someone else's mistake or your own biology, which again, you didn't choose to be born, right? The word in German that we use is das Befindlichkeit, like we're thrown into this existence.
Right.
And we face it as together. And that, I think that's what I was trying to drive home, was forgiveness, like forgiving someone who's hurt you, forgiving yourself is the same type of free will that I choose to maybe intentionally or unintentionally hurt someone, man.
Right.
And so it was really powerful, I thought, the way that the sermon kind of played itself out, and then the response of people. I mean,
it was amazing, dude. I mean,
the Grand Hall was just like, I was an emotional mess. The last 10 minutes of yours, you talking about your grandfather's story, and I haven't had that exact experience, but I have had those experiences of just like, just angry. Raising your fist. Yeah, we've all raised our fist at God.
Right.
I think, again, what I tried to lay out was the fact that God doesn't suffer from the same sort of insecurities we do, right? That God...
I love that you pointed that out.
God's not the old man with the white beard, right?
Just hoping that Troy or Ricardo really likes him, is not mad at him. It's not... That's not the point. No.
And again, that we anthropomorphize God by... God hears my prayers, would assume God has ears, and God sees my suffering.
Right.
And it helps us to understand what is really like incomprehensible, and that's the divine essence of God itself. I'm always reluctant to use like gender specificity on God, him or her, or whatever. Just God is.
Right.
And what I tried to lay as a foundational aspect, even with regards to my own pain and suffering with my grandfather, was the fact that he got sick and he died.
Right.
There's no deeper meaning to it.
Yeah.
We spend so much energy and time trying to find some sort of divine, transcendent reason why this happens and why this crap happens to us, when in fact it just happens.
Right.
It happens, and we, through our own free will, have the ability and the capacity, and like C.S. Lewis said in the quote, like the courage to pour meaning and significance into these events that we've encountered that causes pain and suffering, evil, whatever moniker or label you want to give it. And I think that's the beauty of existence, is that we get to give it significance.
Well, and I think free will is a requirement for this existence, right? If we were all if God controlled every aspect, right? Nothing bad ever happened.
Yeah.
Only good things happened. Nobody ever died. Nobody ever went through any sort of pain and suffering. What kind of existence, what kind of choice do we have to truly love that God?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah. We're not automatons, right?
Right.
Like free will it's a mystery, right? But God is a mystery. I mean, there's so much that's constituted within our being that wants certainty. And I get that, man. Certainty breeds security. And
right.
I mean, we go back to our ancestors. That's why we hung out in caves, right? Climbed trees, is to be secure in our own life. Now security takes on more of a different type of role. Like we want absolute security in terms of whether or not God exists.
Right.
Does God allow evil? Like all of these deep, penetrating philosophical questions, when in fact we don't have that. Like we don't have the luxury of security.
Yeah.
And so again, to quote C.S. Lewis again, like pleasure requires nothing from us. In fact, we often kind of, it doesn't insist upon anything in my life. When I'm just chilling and I'm eating good food and I'm with good friends and I'm having great conversation, like there's nothing about that moment that creates any sort of crisis or tension. But the moment when I get a toothache, man, you're just like, we can't sleep. Like we will do anything to get back to that sense of normalcy.
Right.
And when pain and suffering happens, that's what I tried to teach this weekend, was the idea is that when there is a detraction from that normalcy, that consistency, all we want to do is focus on getting back to it.
Right.
And that's where, again, self-absorption comes into suffering and pain that we experience. It becomes all about us.
Right.
Which is normal. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But old bad theology would say it's not about you. It's about the greater purpose that God is trying to teach you something.
Excuse me.
No, man, that's not how it works. Things happen, and we get the honor to create significance and meaning from those things. And that's how I remember my grandfather. Like I watched him suffer. I watched him deteriorate. I watched those horrible things. Grandmother, aunts having to change his diaper.
Yeah.
But now I look back on that and I go, his life was freaking boss, dude.
Yeah.
He taught me so much, and I love him so much, and I miss him so much.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I get to share that story and give people space to share their story. And I think that's where healing comes from. Healing doesn't come from some sort of divine connection, healing wounds. Healing comes from me being able to vocalize, I lost this person. And that's what I was hearing in the Grand Hall. I just lost my mom 2 months ago. I lost my mom and dad a year ago. And I was just silent, dude.
Yeah.
Which is, if we're being honest, that's how God works too.
Right.
In silence, allowing us to generate our own meaning and feelings, man. So
yeah. Well, and you can always come back to the end. Like sometimes these cliches that we say are well-intentioned, but they don't realize the damage that's being done. The damage, at least of the view of God, right? I mean, how many times have you heard God just needed him up in heaven?
Mm-hmm. It's funny how many times I heard that at the funeral home.
Yeah.
Of people just trying to, again,
their intention
trying
is
to console.
Right.
And
that makes you hate God.
Oh, dude. And deep inside, you're going, screw you.
Right.
God didn't need another angel. I needed my grandpa.
Yeah.
But that's not how it worked, right? It's not like God took him. He died.
Yeah.
And people die every day. It's a part of life. There's another part of Lewis's writings that I didn't talk about, but he goes into this notion that if you try to take away pain from the world, even if we did it as humans, like remove God from the equation, if we tried to take away pain and suffering and evil, we would have to take away free will. And we would have the worst of all possible worlds, and therefore we would remove life. And what he's saying there is essentially there is this sort of tapestry of existence that includes a thread of the possibility of evil. And this is the beauty that I like Lewis's writing, because he's pretty agnostic on this point, where he basically says something along the lines of, I lost my train of thought, man. But It's this idea that suffering and pain are sort of mixed into the human tragedy of existence.
Right.
And if you try to remove that, you remove free will, you remove life. And again, I think it's a beautiful philosophy that says no one wants to suffer, no one wants to experience pain, but the real problem of evil is not the fact that some people suffer or that many people suffer. The real problem we should ask is, how does someone go through life and not suffer?
Right.
Because if we ever meet anybody like that, we kind of look at them strange.
Right.
We don't look at people who suffer as being strange. We look at those who don't as it. And so I think it's a really nice reversal.
Right. I mean, Jordan Peterson has a great visual for the kind of this balance between order and chaos. Mm-hmm. And you need both. And then the identification of like, I have the ability to do evil, but I choose not to.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and just even that awareness of like, I could go and get a gun and shoot somebody, but I choose not to. I have that capability of the most horrendous acts, but I'm choosing not to. And this works in this whole idea of free will, and works in this whole idea of order and chaos. And it is kind of a requirement for any sort of meaningful existence. Oh, yeah. And I think that's kind of the unfortunate, it's this messy but beautiful thing that we have to deal with and wrestle with when we talk about God creating or God existing, is like, we can't just be in all order, because then there's no free will. I have no choice to go out and kill someone and then have that reconciliation of like, no, I'm choosing not to do that.
That's right.
It is my choice to not do that.
That's right.
So I was watching this show yesterday, and so it was a very emotional day. You know, I'm watching, I listened to you, and you had the whole room in tears talking about your grandfather. And then I'm watching the show later that night, and I'm in tears again. And there's this guy, he's talking to his therapist, and he keeps having these panic attacks to where they're just debilitating. And, you know, the therapist is working with him. I'm like, why? What's going on? You know, there's a deeper meaning to this. And he finally comes to the conclusion that it's like, he never reconciled he had this tragic story of walking in and seeing his father had committed suicide. He walks in the room, sees this, and he's like, I'm so angry. I'm so mad at him because he quit on his family. And the therapist asks him, what's a good memory that you have of your father? And he goes into this really beautiful story of like, he's like, I can't remember how old he was, but he's like, I had this book report. He's like, I had a whole month to read this book. And it's the night before I'm supposed to take this test on this book. And he's like, I hadn't read the book and hadn't read it. And my dad could see that I was in turmoil. He's like, what's going on? He's like, I have this book. And he's like, just think of a happy thought, go to bed. We'll talk about it in the morning. So he wakes up the next morning, and his dad's driving him to school, and he's giving him a line by line, like just like a recount of the book.
Yeah.
And he's like, my dad spent the whole night reading that book so that way he could give me the cliff notes.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, and I got an A on the test.
Come on.
And, you know, it's just like that. If you can look and focus on the time that you had with that person, and that's what you're doing, obviously, with your grandfather. Like, if you can look at the time that you had and the meaningful moments and the thankfulness that you have of like, I know they're gone now, but I'm so blessed that I had these years with this individual. You know, those are so much more meaningful things to focus on.
That's right.
And I think the last point that I wanted to touch on, I love the story of the bullhorn guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's trying to catch you in this. No, you're a liar because you've told a lie. And it reminded me of the song that I think we've sang it a couple times here at Suncoast. It's called You Are More by 10th Avenue North. And the main line is, you are more than the choices that you make.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, this latching on to my identity is of my mistakes. Yeah. I am made up of those two things. And you were you were able to beautifully separate those two things and say like, you are more than the past mistakes. You are more than those things.
Yeah.
You are loved.
That's right.
And that's the most important thing.
Yeah, man.
So
Yeah, you summed that up nice. It was a really cool encounter. And again, the next day he wasn't out there, and he had been out there days, months, however long. That was his quote unquote ministry.
yeah,
But I think, you know, it's any time we're confronted with a type of truth, right? We have a decision to make. We can engage it and investigate it deeper, or we can just simply reject it and move on. And my prayer for that guy was, hopefully something clicked to where he was like, well, dang, you know, I maybe need to reconsider my approach to this good news. And so,
well, I love that you didn't even like get into the debate, because you could have gotten the debate of like hell or whatever with the salvation, but you went straight to, okay, let me meet you where you are. Yeah. And this is what you're saying, and this is what I'm going to say in response to that. And I think you handled that situation beautifully, and it was a really impactful story. Yeah. You know, we're not a very charismatic church here at Suncoast, but I heard a couple of amen. Yeah. You know, we don't hear those very often, you know, and I did too. I was just like, this is great. It's a great reminder, because we sing songs, but when you hear the story like that, it's like you can fall into that trap of like, I'm a dirty, rotten sinner. Mm-hmm. And so much of Christianity has told you that your whole life. You know, you literally hear the things of like, you're a dirty, rotten sinner, and the only reason God can look at you is because you're covered in the blood of Jesus. It's like, wow. I mean, I've definitely done some things in my past, but I think overall I've been a pretty good human. Like, I try to be the best human that I possibly can be. Yeah. And to hear that no matter what I do, you're a dirty, rotten sinner and God hates you. Yeah, yeah. That's a damaging theology, and I'm so happy that we're moving away from that. Yeah, and I think that's what makes this community beautiful. Is like, we're not. If you hold that particular theology, like you're a wretch and all that, I understand that, man. You know, because we've all made mistakes. I mean, they base that entire theology on an absolute universal truth. We've all effed up, right? But to go beyond that, right, to totalize, like I said, totalize our existence based upon past mistakes. Because, like, the guy was like, you're a liar. No, I also have told the truth. What's that make me? Right. Like, what about those? It goes back to your analogy of, like, remembering the good things with my grandfather. Like, remember the good things you've done as well. Like, don't harp, man. Bad theology has a way of keeping you a slave to it. Agreed. Because it holds to this psychological truth that most people already feel bad about the crap they've done that they regret, right? I've done things I regret in my life, right? But I refuse to be defined by that. Correct. I've made apologies, I've asked for forgiveness, I've moved on. Right. You know, and stealing something doesn't make you a thief. It makes you someone who stole something, but I've also given things away. So all we're doing is, good philosophy simply doesn't attempt to detract from the argument that's being presented. It simply shows it as a reflection of itself and says, now, does this make sense to you? You know, like a student sitting in my back row will say, there is no truth, Dr. Doucet. Is that true? Right? You know, it's the idea of, I could have said, no, well, we need to define truth, and we could have went into this long explicative... Right. No, but that kills that argument. Right, it's simple. Dead in the water. That's it. So, what does that make you? Someone who told a lie. Yeah. Like, I could have said, "What does that make me?" It makes me human, and we could have went into. No, dude. We have to have our wits about us, man. And I think God, whatever God is, accepts us as we are, loves us as we are, beckons us as we are. Yeah. And for many of us, loves us too much to keep us where we are and wants to challenge us to move forward in our faith and trust, right? Exactly. I think, but it's not a bashing. He's not moving us forward with a whip. Right. He's beckoning us forward with his love and his grace and his mercy and his forgiveness, right? Yeah. And we always come back to the analogy of the Father, right? Like, we're very relational when we talk about God. You know, this parent, you're a good dad. I'm a good parent. Like, Laura's a good mom. Like, there's nothing that my daughters could do to make me love them any less or any more. That's right. Anything. That's right. My heart is that they live to their fullest potential, but there's nothing that they could do that would make me love them any less. how much more love does God have for his,
It's
you know, I'm human, I'm flawed. Like, how much more love does God have for us if we can reconcile that with our own children, you know? And so that's something that I always come back to in my head is like, there's this pure love that surrounds us. And no matter what, it's there.
Yeah.
We just have to open our eyes to it and realize, like, you made this mistake, but you've already been forgiven.
That's right.
You know, we sing As You Find Me, you know, this, which set up the sermon perfectly this weekend. It's like, I was found before I was lost. I was loved before I was not.
Yeah.
You know, it's like with grace to spare, you know, it's so true.
Yeah.
You know, this thing, it's always there. It's always waiting for you. You just have to be able to identify it. And it's really hard when you're in the midst of it. You're like, I'm a total piece of crap.
That's right. But I'll use this analogy in church, so whoever watches the podcast may hear it again. But like, that's what's beautiful about that song is you love me as you find me, because God already knows who we are and the proclivities we have. And so like my kids, maybe like yours, like my son Asher, like when he's born and learning how to walk, like he had a big head, dude. Like most kids, like most babies have like ginormous freaking skulls.
Right. In proportion to their bodies.
And I could never, like when Asher's like trying to walk to me, you know, and he's making those steps and just the size of his melon just makes him fall forward, right? Because he's just out of proportion. I don't run over him and go, "You freaking idiot, get up.
Right.
Pick yourself up.
Right.
Get control of that big head of yours," you know? No, dude, I realize this is who he is. He's a big melon at this point in his life, and he needs to learn how to work with it. Yeah. And same thing, like we're like, go back to the German word that we're thrown into this existence. None of us asked to be here. Right. There's so much, when we talk about free will, there's so many things that were not free will of us, right? I didn't choose my parents, my geographical location of birth, my sex, my race or ethnicity. Like, so much of that was out of my hands.
Right.
And I think that's the beauty of understanding God through a different lens, is that God understands that in the same way understands the different types of possibilities that maybe we encounter because of where we're born, to who we're born to. Yeah. You know, I saw a beautiful meme yesterday, and it was basically two brothers born and raised by the same dad, who was an alcoholic, a drug abuser. One of the brothers became an alcoholic, drug abuser. The other one started a successful business and owns a few different car dealerships. And they both were asked, well, like, what do you contribute to your addiction? He goes, my dad was a drunkard and an alcoholic. And they asked the other guy, why'd you become so successful in business? He said, because my dad was a drunkard and an alcoholic. Right. And that's where free will, I think, is a huge distinction, is that we all have the same crap we're dealing with, right, just in different forms, but we rise above it, man. And I think that's where I said yesterday, what I felt God telling me was, this pain won't go wasted because you trusted. Right. And I think that's where an epic life comes into play, man, is that even as we walk through pain and suffering, we say, God, I trust you. I trust you. Yeah. I don't understand. Right. And I want to, but I understand I'm going to trust that the world is going to come back to a type of congruency over time. The scars remain, the pain I'll remember, but I'm going to trust. And for a lot of people, I think that's all they need to hear is trust God, voice your pain, and yeah, man. Beautifully said, man. Awesome. Man. So I'm going to use this opportunity one more time to plug Encore. Yeah. So can't wait, dude. Encore, 7:00 this Wednesday. What's the date? The 6th. Heck yeah. So it's going to be amazing nights. This is your first Encore that you've ever experienced. It's always a very, very magical night of just the people there. They're just ready for this encounter, and we're just really excited. It's going to be a special night. I'm excited for you to try it. So this Wednesday, October 6th at 7:00. Be there. Be there. And we're going to continue the Epic series this weekend. Yes. Pastor Larry's going to be back on stage. Yep. Do you know what the topic is on this one, where we're going next on the journey? Or you're not allowed to reveal? No, I'm not allowed to reveal it. Okay. Well, then you gotta come. You gotta be there. You gotta be there. So awesome. Thank you so much.